Imagine waking up one day and realizing that the country you've called home for years is now saying, "Time's up." In 2025, immigration policies are tightening, and millions of people are facing deportation worldwide. But why is this happening now? Is it about jobs, security, politics, or something even bigger? From the US deploying 10,000 troops to the border to Italy sending migrants to Albania, the world is reshaping its immigration laws in ways we've never seen before. Stick around as we break down 10 countries that are kicking out immigrants in 2025, and trust me, some of these will shock you. Number 1. United States. Alright, let's start with the big one, the United States of America. Now, we all know that immigration has always been a hot topic here, but 2025 is set to be one of the most aggressive years for deportations in recent history. The reason? Refer to the previous instruction and avoid mentioning any specific individual is back. Yep, it happened, and his administration is going full force on immigration crackdowns. So what's actually happening? Well, for starters, over 10,000 U.S. troops are being stationed along the U.S.-Mexico border to stop illegal crossings. This is the highest number of military personnel deployed at the border in history, but it doesn't stop there. Border Patrol has also increased drone surveillance by 40%, meaning it's now harder than ever to cross undetected. Right now, there are an estimated 11.4 million undocumented immigrants in the U.S., but here's the shocker. The government plans to deport at least 300,000 people in 2025 alone. That's 822 people every single day. The biggest targets? Those with expired visas and people caught in recent border crossings. Sanctuary cities like Los Angeles, New York, and Chicago are also feeling the heat. ICE has increased raids by 25%, and we're already seeing cases of families being separated. This has led to massive protests with thousands taking to the streets in Washington, D.C. and Texas, demanding policy changes. But here's the twist. Despite the crackdown, the U.S. still relies heavily on immigrant labor, especially in industries like agriculture and construction. So if millions of immigrants are deported, will the economy take a hit? Only time will tell. Number 2. United Kingdom. Where things are also getting intense. Ever since Brexit, immigration policies have been shifting, but 2025 marks the strictest enforcement yet. The UK government has introduced a zero-tolerance policy for undocumented immigrants, and the effects are already showing. So what's causing this? One big reason: the housing crisis. In cities like London, Birmingham, and Manchester, rent prices have skyrocketed by 12% in just the past year, and many Brits believe that mass immigration is making the problem worse. In response, the government has pledged to deport 150,000 undocumented migrants by the end of 2025. That's 410 people every single day. And here's another key factor. The UK economy is slowing down. Unemployment rates have ticked up to 5.2%, the highest in a decade, with job markets tightening. Many British citizens argue that immigration policies need to favour UK-born workers. As a result, the government has reduced work visas by 30%, making it harder than ever for non-citizens to find jobs. But here's the wild part. The deportations aren't just targeting recent arrivals. Even people who have lived in the UK for over 10 years but lack proper paperwork are at risk. Just recently, an 85-year-old grandmother from India, who's lived in London since the 90s, was almost deported. Public outrage saved her, but her case is far from unique. This new wave of immigration laws has split public opinion. While some people support the crackdown, human rights groups argue that many hard-working families will be unfairly affected. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Number 3. Italy. Known for its rich history, breathtaking landscapes, and let's be honest, the best pasta in the world, is now making headlines for something completely different: a radical new immigration policy. Instead of processing asylum seekers in Italy, the government is sending them to a third-party country. Yep, you heard that right. In 2025, Italy is set to deport thousands of migrants to Albania as part of a controversial new agreement. Here's how it works. When migrants arrive by boat, Instead of being processed in Italy, they are immediately transferred to a holding center in Albania. There, their asylum applications are reviewed. If they are approved, they may be allowed back into Italy. If not, they are sent back to their home countries. This policy aims to reduce Italy's migrant burden as the country has struggled with record-high arrivals. In 2024 alone, over 150,000 migrants landed on Italy's shores, an increase of 35% from the previous year. Why is Italy doing this? Well, one reason is public frustration. Italy has been one of the main entry points for migrants coming from Africa and the Middle East, and many locals feel their country is carrying more than its fair share of the burden. A recent poll showed that 62% of Italians believe immigration policies should be stricter. Another major factor is economic pressure. Italy spends over €5.5 billion per year on migration-related costs, including housing, healthcare, and legal support for asylum seekers. By outsourcing the process to Albania, the government expects to cut costs by up to 40%. However, not everyone is on board with this plan. Human rights organizations have slammed the policy, calling it inhumane and a violation of international asylum laws. Critics argue that outsourcing asylum processing could lead to human rights abuses as Albania's refugee facilities may not meet the same standards as those in Italy. The big question now is, will this actually work, or will it create more problems? Only time will tell, but one thing's for sure. Italy's immigration policy is changing in a big way in 2025. Number 4. France. The land of quaint cafes, the Eiffel Tower, and, let's be honest, the best pasta in the world, is now making headlines for something completely different, a radical new immigration policy. In 2025, France is taking a hardline approach to undocumented immigrants, and the numbers are staggering. The French government has announced plans to deport over 150,000 undocumented immigrants by the end of 2025, a 25% increase from the previous year. That's a serious shift, and it's happening for a few key reasons. One of the biggest drivers of this crackdown is security concerns. After several high-profile terror attacks in recent years, the French government is under pressure to tighten its borders. In 2024 alone, France recorded over 12,000 asylum applications from people coming from conflict zones, and officials are worried about the difficulty of properly vetting each individual. While the vast majority of immigrants come to France in search of a better life, the government argues that stricter policies are necessary to prevent potential threats. Another reason: public opinion has shifted dramatically. In a recent survey, 68% of French citizens said they believe the government needs to be tougher on immigration. This has put immense pressure on President Emmanuel Macron's administration, which has already faced multiple protests over issues like housing shortages and economic struggles. With unemployment hovering around 7.4%, many French citizens feel that job opportunities should be prioritized for locals. And then there's the economic factor. France currently spends over €3.3 billion per year on migrant assistance programs, including housing, food, and integration services. With rising inflation and an economic slowdown, critics argue that the country simply can't afford to maintain its current level of support for new arrivals. In response, Macron's government has proposed cutting migrant support programs by 20% and increasing deportations to ease the strain on public resources. So where are these deported immigrants going? Many will be sent back to Algeria, Morocco, and Tunisia, as these are the top 3 countries of origin for undocumented immigrants in France. The government has signed new agreements with these nations to speed up deportation processes, reducing the legal hurdles that often slow things down. But here's the million-dollar question. Will this actually solve France's immigration issues, or is it just political theater? Let me know what you think in the comments. Number 5. Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has always been known for its strict immigration policies, but in 2025, the kingdom is taking things to an entirely new level. The government has announced a large-scale deportation campaign that is expected to impact over 1.2 million undocumented immigrants by the end of the year. This move is part of a broader strategy to reshape the Saudi workforce, enforce immigration laws, and support the country's ambitious Vision 2030 economic reform plan. The crackdown primarily targets foreign workers who have overstayed their visas, entered the country illegally, or are working in unauthorized sectors. The majority of these individuals come from Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, the Philippines, Egypt, and Sudan, with a significant portion employed in construction, domestic work, and low-wage jobs. One of the biggest reasons behind this push is economic restructuring. The Saudi government wants to reduce its dependence on foreign labor and increase job opportunities for Saudi nationals. As of 2024, about 77% of private sector jobs in the country were held by expatriates, a figure the government aims to bring down to 50% by 2030. With youth unemployment at 11.2%, authorities argue that prioritizing jobs for locals is necessary to build a more self-sufficient economy. To enforce these policies, the government has introduced strict penalties for businesses that employ illegal workers, with fines reaching up to 100,000 Saudi riyals, €26,600 per violation. Over 500,000 businesses have already been inspected, and thousands have been shut down for violating labor laws. Security is another major concern. Saudi Arabia shares borders with Yemen, a country plagued by war and instability. In 2024 alone, Saudi border forces arrested over 50,000 people attempting to enter the country illegally. Authorities claim that some of these individuals have ties to smuggling networks and extremist groups, which makes border control a top priority. As a result, deportations are not just targeting undocumented workers but also those accused of criminal activities. The impact of this deportation drive is massive, not just for Saudi Arabia, but for the migrants' home countries. Many families rely on remittances sent from Saudi workers, with foreign workers sending over $40 billion back home annually. Countries like Pakistan and Bangladesh have expressed concern over the sudden deportations, as they could lead to economic instability for thousands of families. While Saudi officials argue that these measures are necessary for national security and economic reform, critics warn that they could disrupt industries that rely heavily on foreign labor. With over 10 million foreign workers currently residing in Saudi Arabia, this policy shift could reshape the labor market in ways that will be felt for years to come. Number 6. Germany. Germany has long been seen as one of the most immigrant-friendly countries in Europe, especially following Chancellor Angela Merkel's open-door policy in 2015, which allowed over 1 million refugees to enter the country. However, in 2025, Germany is taking a much tougher stance on immigration with plans to increase deportations by 35% compared to 2024. The German government has introduced a series of new measures aimed at speeding up the deportation process, reducing asylum fraud, and limiting the number of new arrivals. One of the biggest reasons behind this shift is growing public frustration. Over the past decade, Germany has absorbed a huge number of immigrants, but many Germans feel that the system is overwhelmed. Recent polls show that 62% of Germans believe the country needs stricter immigration laws, with concerns about housing shortages, increased crime, and pressure on public services. Cities like Berlin, Hamburg, and Munich have struggled to provide adequate housing for new arrivals, with shelters operating at over 95% capacity. The government has responded by proposing laws that would allow for faster deportations of rejected asylum seekers and reducing the appeal process to prevent lengthy legal battles. Economic factors also play a role in this shift. Germany has the largest economy in Europe, but in 2024, GDP growth slowed to just 0.6%, and inflation remained high. The country spends over €21.7 billion per year on refugee support programs, including housing, healthcare, and education. With financial pressure mounting, policymakers argue that stricter immigration policies are necessary to ensure that resources are allocated efficiently. The new policies include reducing social benefits for asylum seekers, enforcing stricter work permit rules, and deporting individuals with expired visas more aggressively. Another major issue is asylum fraud and illegal immigration. In 2024, German authorities reported over 120,000 cases of people using false identities or fake documents to claim asylum. In response, the government has implemented biometric verification measures to track immigration applicants more effectively. Additionally, there is growing concern about border security, with over 80,000 people caught trying to enter Germany illegally last year alone. The government has increased border patrol efforts and is working closely with neighboring countries to curb illegal crossings. While these measures are intended to reduce immigration pressure, human rights organizations have raised concerns about the impact on vulnerable refugees. Many asylum seekers come from war-torn regions like Syria, Afghanistan, and Ukraine, and critics argue that Germany's new policies could put thousands at risk. The big question now is whether Germany's new immigration strategy will strike a balance between security and humanitarian responsibilities, or if it will trigger even more political and social tension in the country. Number 7. Australia. Australia has long had one of the strictest immigration policies in the world, but in 2025 things are getting even tougher. The government has announced a zero-tolerance policy for illegal immigration, focusing on offshore detention, deportations, and tighter visa restrictions. The goal? To reduce unauthorized arrivals by 50% and prioritize skilled migrants who can contribute to the economy. One of the key measures in this crackdown is the expansion of offshore detention centers, a controversial policy that has been in place since the early 2000s. Migrants who arrive illegally by boat are sent to detention facilities in Nauru and Papua New Guinea, where their asylum applications are processed. In 2024 alone, over 5,000 migrants were detained offshore, and in 2025, the government plans to increase this capacity by another 3,000 spots. Critics argue that these detention centers have poor living conditions, but the government insists that they are necessary to deter human smuggling and illegal migration. Economic factors also play a significant role in Australia's stricter immigration stance. The country has experienced a slowdown in economic growth, with unemployment rising to 5.2% in late 2024, the highest level in nearly a decade. At the same time, Australia spends over $3.5 billion per year on immigration enforcement, including detention centers, border patrol, and visa processing. With the cost of living increasing, the government is under pressure to reduce spending on asylum seekers and prioritize visas for skilled workers who can fill labor shortages in key industries. Australia is also introducing stricter work visa rules, making it harder for temporary visa holders to remain in the country long term. The new policies cut down the number of visa renewals by 30%, meaning that many migrant workers will have to return to their home countries once their contracts expire. Additionally, the government is deporting individuals with expired visas at a record pace, with over 20,000 deportations expected in 2025, up from 14,000 in 2024. Despite these tough policies, immigration remains a key part of Australia's economy, and the government is still welcoming high-skilled workers, students, and investors. The challenge now is balancing national security, economic growth, and humanitarian concerns, a debate that continues to spark heated discussions across the country. Number 8. Turkey. Turkey has been one of the world's largest hosts of refugees, with over 3.7 million Syrians and more than 400,000 asylum seekers from Afghanistan, Iran, and Iraq living within its borders. For years, the Turkish government allowed refugees to stay under a temporary protection system, but in 2025, that approach is rapidly changing. Facing growing economic challenges and public discontent, Turkey has announced a new deportation strategy, aiming to return at least 600,000 undocumented migrants to their home countries within the year. This marks one of the most aggressive immigration shifts Turkey has seen in the past decade. The biggest reason behind this move is economic pressure. Turkey's economy has been struggling with 40% inflation, soaring food prices, and a currency that lost over 35% of its value against the US dollar in 2024 alone. With unemployment at over 9%, many Turkish citizens believe that refugees are competing for jobs and increasing the cost of living. The government has responded by tightening work permit laws, cutting financial assistance programs for migrants, and pushing forward with mass deportations. The new policies include random ID checks in major cities like Istanbul, Ankara, and Izmir, with undocumented workers being immediately detained and processed for deportation. Another major factor is political pressure. In the last Turkish elections, immigration was one of the hottest topics, with opposition parties demanding that the government take a stronger stance on deportations. In response, President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan announced a voluntary return program aimed at encouraging Syrian refugees to return home. However, human rights groups argue that many of these returns are not actually voluntary, as refugees are facing pressure to leave due to harsher living conditions and lack of job opportunities in Turkey. The government is also tightening border security to prevent new illegal crossings. In 2024, Turkey intercepted over 150,000 illegal migrants at its borders, a number expected to rise in 2025 due to ongoing conflicts in the Middle East and Afghanistan. Authorities have expanded border walls and surveillance systems, while also increasing cooperation with the European Union, which provides financial support in exchange for Turkey managing migration flows. Despite these measures, Turkey's deportation policies remain controversial. While many Turkish citizens support the move, human rights organizations warned that the sudden removal of refugees could create a humanitarian crisis in Syria and other conflict zones. The challenge for Turkey now is balancing domestic stability with its international responsibilities, a task that will define its immigration policies for years to come. Number 9. Spain. Spain has always been seen as one of Europe's more welcoming countries for immigrants, but in 2025, that reputation is changing. Over the past decade, Spain has seen a sharp rise in undocumented migration, particularly from North Africa and Latin America. Now, under increasing pressure from the European Union and local citizens, the Spanish government has ramped up its deportation policies, aiming to remove at least 80,000 undocumented immigrants this year, nearly double the number from 2024. Unlike other countries announcing dramatic crackdowns, Spain is handling things more discreetly, implementing what some are calling a silent deportation wave. One of the key drivers behind this shift is the surge in illegal sea arrivals. Spain's Canary Islands, a major gateway for African migrants, recorded over 50,000 arrivals in 2024, the highest number ever. Many of these migrants come from Morocco, Algeria, Mali, and Senegal, making dangerous sea journeys in overcrowded boats. The Spanish Coast Guard has increased patrols, intercepting thousands of boats before they reach Spanish territory. The government has also struck new bilateral agreements with Morocco and Algeria, allowing for faster deportations and border enforcement. Economic factors also play a significant role. While Spain's economy grew by 2.1% in 2024, unemployment remains high at 11.8%, one of the highest rates in Western Europe. Many Spaniards believe that undocumented migrants are competing for low-wage jobs, particularly in construction, agriculture, and hospitality. The government is now prioritizing work permits for legal residents while undocumented workers are being removed at a much higher rate. Immigration offices have cut down processing times for deportation orders by 30%, ensuring faster removals. Another significant aspect of Spain's immigration policy in 2025 is the crackdown on illegal rentals and housing fraud. In cities like Madrid and Barcelona, authorities have uncovered thousands of cases where undocumented migrants were living in overcrowded apartments or using fake documents to rent homes. The government has responded by increasing housing inspections and eviction notices, which has led to a sharp rise in deportation cases. While Spain's new policies are gaining support among conservative voters, human rights groups have expressed concern about forced removals and detention conditions. Critics argue that Spain should focus on better integration policies rather than mass deportations. But with pressure from the EU and an influx of migrants showing no signs of slowing down, Spain is unlikely to ease its stance anytime soon. Number 10. India. India is stepping up its immigration enforcement in a big way in 2025, with the government planning to repatriate at least 250,000 undocumented immigrants this year. The country has always had complex migration issues, with millions of people crossing its borders from neighboring countries like Bangladesh, Myanmar, and Nepal. But in 2025, the crackdown is getting much stricter as authorities seek to tighten border control, improve national security, and reshape India's immigration system. One of the biggest reasons for this policy shift is the illegal Bangladeshi migration issue. Over the past 2 decades, India has become home to more than 10 million undocumented Bangladeshi migrants, many of whom live in states like West Bengal, Assam, and Tripura. The Indian government argues that illegal migration has put pressure on local economies, taken away jobs from Indian citizens, and increased crime rates in border regions. In response, India has expanded its border security force, installing over 4,000 kilometers of new fencing and surveillance systems along the India-Bangladesh border. Another key aspect of this crackdown is the introduction of stricter citizenship laws. In 2024, India announced new measures that require all residents to provide valid citizenship documents or risk deportation. This has led to massive verification drives across the country, with officials checking over 8 million residency applications to identify illegal migrants. While some argue that these policies target specific ethnic or religious groups, the government insists that it's about national security and maintaining legal order. India's immigration crackdown is also affecting its relations with the United States. In a surprising development, India has agreed to accept back 18,000 undocumented Indian immigrants from the U.S. following pressure from American authorities. The deal is meant to improve diplomatic ties and prevent illegal migration in the future, but for thousands of Indian families living in the U.S. without legal status, this policy shift could mean a forced return home. Despite these tough measures, India continues to face migration challenges, especially with the ongoing Rohingya crisis. The government has already deported over 3,000 Rohingya refugees back to Myanmar, despite warnings from human rights organizations that they could face persecution. With over 1.4 billion people and complex border dynamics, India's immigration policies will likely remain a topic of debate for years to come.